Hey guys, Kyle the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for Black Clover episode 32, and this was actually this was definitely this was definitely an interesting episode in which both the pacing and the content of it just seemed more entertaining. I almost want to say it's one of those things where pretty much once the main bad guy of the arc is introduced, that's really when things pick up for Black Clover, and in this case, it did because the main bad guy was in fact introduced, and this bad guy or bad girl, I guess, in this case, was introduced. Um, so to start off with, we actually get a bit of backstory on Sister Lily of all people, and I do gotta say, it's about time because I was wondering how much longer she was gonna just be Asta's romantic foil, but despite that, we definitely see how much of an impact she has that Asta actually has on her life, which does give her a little bit more character depth than just being a nun. And that's honestly one thing I think I've started to realize and understand about the character development in Black Clover is that it doesn't give you a whole lot, but it will give you just enough to care the right amount about the characters that you need to, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Here, I'm somewhere in the middle because it's like we definitely got characterization on Sister Lily, but I feel Gauche could be getting a lot more character development in this, like a lot more character development and spotlight than he has been getting. But then again, considering this arc isn't over yet, that there is still room to make it happen. Although, since we are on the subject of the arc, I do feel it was in this episode in general, there was definitely, strange enough, I felt there was a vast improvement compared to the last couple episodes we've gotten. Starting with pacing, for instance, it was a lot better than last episode. Like, we actually got two chapters adapted, which honestly, it's one of those things where just the fact that we got two chapters adapted, there's definitely room for speculation there as to what we'll be getting in the future if the chapter is adapted, or if this arc is going to end, if this first season of Black Clover is going to end with this arc, or if it's gonna transition over into the next arc, which I could easily see it happening, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it ended it here, and if it does end, and if this arc does end before this first season does, uh, then I think we could very easily transition into the next arc. Like I said, depending on how the pacing goes, but knowing Piero the way I do, they definitely have a tendency to add filler and slow down the pacing, pretty much just when things are getting the most hype. So yeah, I'm not holding my breath for basically for pretty much for the show to transition into the next arc after this one, but it would be cool if it did. Yeah, and art and animation art and animation as well. Like, pacing and art and animation and pacing and art and animation were the two things that received a major bump for me in this episode, and art and animation especially seemed to get quite a bit of a bump this week because while there were a few small hiccups to be sure, everything else seemed vastly more detailed before. And with the art and animation this week, there was very rarely a moment when I felt that the animation looked choppy, or that character art looked a little off model. But no, and again, there were moments, small moments like that, but overall, like, I'd say that the things just were vastly improved in this arc compared to the last arc. And yeah, so we learn more about the old nun, who's basically who we learn in this episode what was a former magic knight. That I think her name was, I think it was the she leopard. It was the she leopard Teresa, is what we learned her name was. Her whole lineage was, and it wasn't enough learning that she was a former magic knight, but that was cool enough. But the fact that we learned that she was also the one who ended up teaching Fuegoleon, of all people, or Fuegi as she called him. That was an extra little bit of little badass treat, and now honestly, and now that we've developed a connection between these two characters of Teresa and Fuegi, as she calls him, I desperately want to see how he'd react to seeing his old teacher again. Like honestly, like I know he's not in the best position right now to do that. But if ever time where Teresa and Fue Golin meet again, I imagine it's not going to be the most civil. I imagine it's not going to be the most civil reunion. Like I'd imagine he's actually developed quite a fear of her. He actually developed quite a fear of her over the years from being taught by her, and I'm sure being called Fuegi probably doesn't help either. Like honestly, like as if the name calling wasn't enough, but I could just imagine, just from what we've seen of Teresa, I just imagine her being a total fucking boss, badass teacher. Like, I pretty much I want to say she's pretty much on the same level she's probably on the same level of badass she's on the same level of badass as Izumi Curtis, as Izumi Curtis. Like I imagine her being maybe not that badass, but definitely on that level of badass for sure. And aside, and now that aside, we also learn the mastermind behind the missing children incident. In fact, drum roll please. It was Sally, like I originally thought, which isn't too much reveal when you consider how heavily that they were pushing how much of a scientific whack job she is, and when you look at the scientific gear that pretty much those two flunkies of hers were using, but what was a little surprising to me is how hard she was actually going in against Asta and Gauch in this episode, and proving how much of a legitimate threat she is. I mean, being one of the members of the Midnight, that should pretty much go without saying that Sally is in fact a boss. Like any of the Magic Knight characters are going to be bosses. Like they're going to be top tier, hard as hell to beat characters. But for me, what made her basically a Magic Knight's worst nightmare in this episode wasn't necessarily just her power or her magic, but how effectively she was basically using all of those elements together in order to combat the strength of both Teresa, of sister Teresa, Gauch, and Asta. Like she was basically she was basically using all of her knowledge, all of her skills in order to come up with the perfect defense against them. Like she was using her basically goo magic at its most effective, and I feel that is one thing that might fly over people's heads is that yeah we could probably call it hacks, but at the end of the day we can definitely say that Sally was in fact using her power to its absolute most effective because as much of a whack job she is still knowledgeable about how to use her own magic, and she used it in a way that could actually be effective against an opponent like Asta, for instance. And I feel that Sally also revealed one of Asta's biggest glaring weaknesses in this episode, which is pin him fast enough and he can't do shit unless there's someone to back him up as well as that his biggest blind spot is in fact attacks from the rear for sure. So yeah, we there are definitely a lot of cool bits in order to pick apart in that episode for sure. And of course we definitely see that the battle even isn't over yet. She pretty much turned Sally turned one of her flunkies into basically a mud monster, and I imagine if I understand the logistics of it correctly, pretty much what Sally did is she overloaded his magic. So, and anyone who is injected with that drug, they lose control of their own magic, and she turns them into a magic monster. So, yeah, that's kind of freaky in itself. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for this review. Enjoy the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter and Facebook. That been me. Signing off. Later, guys.